Brothers and sisters, pause for a moment and think about this. What does it mean when history and the present collide in the most unexpected way? What does it mean when a young African president walks side by side with the great powers of the world on one of the most symbolic stages of modern history? The scene is Moscow, Red Square, a place that has witnessed revolutions, wars, triumphs, and unimaginable sacrifices. Today it vibrates with the thunder of marching soldiers, the clatter of military engines, and the pride of a nation celebrating survival against impossible odds. The banners are flying. The world's cameras are watching. It is the 80th anniversary of the victory over Nazi Germany, a victory that reshaped the 20th century. But wait, something is different this year. Amid the rows of decorated generals, the stern faces of diplomats, and the polished uniforms of soldiers, one figure stands out, young, defiant, unexpected. Who is he? Why is he here? And what does his presence truly mean? That man is Ibrahim Traoré, the 36-year-old president of Burkina Faso, a leader who rose from the dust of struggle, who speaks with the fire of conviction, and who has dared to challenge the global order. His very presence in Moscow raises questions that the mainstream media refuses to ask. Why does a small West African nation suddenly find itself standing shoulder to shoulder with Russia on such a historic day? Is this just diplomacy, or is it a declaration? A signal to the world that Africa is no longer content to play the role written for it by colonial powers. Think about it. For decades, the global stage has been dominated by the same voices, the same powers, the same scripts. Yet here, on this anniversary filled with memory and symbolism, a new chapter begins. Traoré is not merely walking in a parade, he is walking into history. Could this be the spark of a new world order? Could this be the moment where the global South rises from the shadows, no longer bowing to the dictates of old empires, but carving its own destiny? One thing is certain. What happened in Moscow that day was not just another diplomatic handshake. It was not just another ceremony. It was a statement. Bold, clear, and impossible to ignore. So I ask you again, is the world we know about to change forever? Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal will challenge everything you thought you knew about power, about alliances, and about the silent revolution unfolding before our very eyes. The Russian president steps forward, his expression unusually warm. Cameras erupt with flashes as the two leaders clasp hands. And then, in a voice heavy with both memory and pride, the host begins. Mr. President, friends, we are very glad to see you. Your visit to celebrate this anniversary is not just symbolic. It reflects the friendship and solidarity between our nations. But let me ask you, why does this moment matter so much? Why does this image of a young African president standing side by side with one of the world's most powerful leaders send ripples far beyond Moscow's Red Square? To answer that, we must travel back in time to a chapter of history that has been nearly erased from Western textbooks. The year is 1940. Europe is engulfed in flames. Nazi Germany seems unstoppable, crushing nations one after another. And in the chaos, a call for help is sent to the colonies of Africa. Burkina Faso, then known as Upper Volta, answers. More than 30,000 of its sons, farmers, workers, young men barely in their 20s, are shipped off to fight under the command of Charles de Gaulle. They join the Free French forces, battling Hitler's war machine across Europe and North Africa. Many of them would never see their homeland again. They died in deserts, in trenches, in frozen fields far from the warmth of their villages. Their names rarely appear in the grand narratives of Europe's victory. Western history often forgets them, but in Burkina Faso their sacrifice lives on, not in textbooks but in the blood of their descendants. Now, fast forward 80 years, the stage is Moscow. The memory of that victory against fascism is honored. And standing there in his military beret and with the steady gaze of a man who carries his people's history is Ibrahim Traoré, the 36-year-old president of Burkina Faso. Do you see the symbolism? The grandsons of those forgotten African soldiers have returned, not as colonial subjects fighting under a European commander, but as free men, as leaders of their own nations, standing shoulder to shoulder with Russia. But the struggle today is different. The enemy is not Nazi Germany. It is something more subtle, yet just as destructive: terrorism, extremism, and the suffocating grip of neo-colonial control. For years, Burkina Faso and much of Africa have been trapped in a cycle of dependency, their resources drained, their leaders pressured, their people living under the shadow of instability. And this is where Traoré's presence in Moscow becomes more than just a diplomatic courtesy. It becomes a statement, a signal, a message to the world that Africa is no longer content to play the role written for it by others. Think about it. For decades, international politics has been a stage where the same actors dominate: Europe, America, a handful of powers deciding the fate of billions. Africa was cast as a background character, spoken about but never listened to. Yet here, on one of the most symbolic anniversaries in modern history, an African leader takes center stage. Could this be the beginning of a new chapter? A chapter where Africa is not merely a victim of global struggles, but an architect of its own destiny. When Traoré walks alongside Russia, it raises questions the West would rather avoid. Is this a sign that Africa is breaking free from the old chains of colonialism? Is this the birth of a new alliance, forged not in contracts and debts, but in shared sacrifice and shared struggle? The symbolism is undeniable. 80 years ago, Burkinabe soldiers fought in Europe's war, their voices silenced in the grand narratives of victory. Today, their descendant, a president born generations later, stands tall and says, "We are no longer forgotten. We are no longer silent. We are here." And yet, this story goes even deeper. Because the fight Traoré speaks of is not just about Burkina Faso. It is about an entire continent that has been underestimated for far too long. It is about nations rising from the ashes of exploitation and saying, "No more." So ask yourself, when the world sees Ibrahim Traoré in Moscow, what are they really seeing? A guest at a parade? Or a sign that the balance of power is shifting before our very eyes? Because history has a way of repeating itself, but not always in the same way. In the 1940s, African soldiers marched under the flags of others. In 2024, their descendants march under their own. That difference is not small, it is seismic. This is not just the story of one handshake, one meeting, or one commemoration. It is the story of memory, of sacrifice, and of a new world struggling to be born. And if you think this is just about Moscow, think again. The implications of this alliance stretch far beyond Russia and Burkina Faso. They reach into the heart of Africa, into the corridors of power in Europe, and into the strategies of America and China. Because when a young African leader dares to stand on equal footing with a superpower, the world takes notice. The question is, are we witnessing the rebirth of an old friendship, or the foundation of something entirely new? One thing is certain: the cameras may have captured a moment, but history will remember it as a signal. A signal that the tides are shifting, that voices long ignored are finally being heard, and that the sacrifices of the past are demanding justice in the present. So I ask you again, brothers and sisters, what really happened that day in Moscow? A handshake? A parade? Or the opening lines of a chapter that could reshape the 21st century? Russia makes it clear: we will continue to support Burkina Faso. We will stand by you as you fight terrorism, restore your sovereignty, and rebuild your constitutional order. This is not empty rhetoric. The evidence is everywhere. After more than 3 decades of silence, the Russian embassy in Ouagadougou has reopened. Economic cooperation is growing, slowly but surely. Scholarships for Burkinabe students in Russia have doubled. Over 3,500 young Burkinabe have already studied in Russian universities, learning science, engineering, medicine, technology, and now more are coming. The ties are no longer just military. They are cultural, educational, humanitarian. Russia is sending wheat free of charge to feed hungry families. Russian institutions are opening language schools, cultural centers, and scientific exchanges. They are not just giving weapons, they are giving knowledge. But then comes the most powerful part of the story, because the spotlight shifts, and the microphone is handed to the man who has become the symbol of African resistance. Ibrahim Traoré steps forward, young, confident, unshaken, his words cut like a blade through the polished halls of diplomacy. For me, he says, it is an honor to stand here on this sacred day of remembrance. I have learned so much during this visit, about the sacrifices of the Russian people, about the price of freedom, and I want to say, it is because of those sacrifices that we too in Africa can dream of freedom today. But he does not stop there. He raises his voice, and suddenly the entire hall is electrified. The terrorism we face in Africa today is not a random curse. It is a legacy of imperialism. It is the shadow left by colonialism. And we must fight it with the same courage with which you once fought fascism. Boom. The room goes silent. Everyone knows what he means. He is not just blaming faceless extremists. He is pointing at the structures of power that left Africa vulnerable, the external hands that still manipulate, destabilize, and profit from African suffering. This is not just rhetoric. This is defiance. Traoré continues. Yes, we fight with weapons. Yes, we fight with soldiers. But the real battle is much bigger. Africa needs education. Africa needs industry. Africa needs technology. And we are ready to learn. We want to build our own factories, our own machines, our own future. But for that, we need partners willing to share, not exploit. We need knowledge transfer, not dependency. He looks straight at the Russian delegation. That is why we ask for cooperation in science, in education, in technology. We want to send our students, our youth, to learn from you. We want Russian universities to open their doors, even their branches in Burkina Faso. Because the true revolution is not just in arms, but in the minds of our people. At this point, you can almost feel the audience holding its breath, because what Traoré is saying is not just about Burkina Faso. It is about Africa as a whole, a continent that has been robbed for centuries of its minerals, of its labor, of its sovereignty. And yet, here stands a young leader saying, we will rise again, but we will do it differently this time. He doesn't stop at education. He speaks of defense. He speaks of industry. He speaks of manufacturing and machinery, the backbone of any independent nation. If we end this war, if we build a strong army, then we can develop our motherland. That is why we fight. That is why we struggle. Because without security, there can be no development. But without knowledge, there can be no lasting independence. It is the kind of speech that resonates far beyond the room. It is not just addressed to Russia. It is addressed to Africa. It is addressed to the West. It is addressed to the entire world. Now let's pause for a second and understand why this is going viral. In a world where African leaders are often portrayed as weak, corrupt, or puppets of foreign powers, here is a man who defies the narrative. He is young, charismatic, unapologetic. He refuses to beg. He refuses to kneel. Instead, he demands respect, partnership, equality. And the symbolism of doing this in Moscow at the anniversary of a war that defined global history is too powerful to ignore. It is a message that Africa is no longer waiting for permission. Africa is stepping onto the world stage with its own voice, its own demands, and its own vision. The Russian leader listens attentively. The cameras record every word, and the world watches. This is more than just bilateral relations. This is a shift in the global order, because when Africa and Russia stand together, it challenges the monopoly of influence that the old colonial powers once enjoyed. Western media may downplay it, they may twist it, but the truth is clear. Something is changing. For decades, Africa was treated as a pawn on the chessboard of global politics. Resources were extracted, governments were manipulated, conflicts were fueled. But now, leaders like Traoré are saying, no more. We will decide our own destiny, and we will choose our partners. Think about it. A continent with the youngest population on Earth, with immense natural resources, with growing cities and unstoppable energy, finally demanding its rightful place. And here is a man who embodies that spirit. This is why the speech is going viral, because it is not just a diplomatic meeting. It is a manifesto, a declaration, a challenge, and it is wrapped in symbolism. The tanks rolling in Red Square, the memory of fallen soldiers, the defiance against sanctions, the standing ovation for a young African leader who dares to speak the truth. Traoré is not naive. He knows that the road ahead is dangerous. Terrorism is still ravaging his country. Economic hardships remain crushing. Powerful interests are watching him closely, hoping for him to fail. But his strategy is clear. Build strong alliances, strengthen education, invest in youth, demand technology transfer, and above all, restore dignity. This is why he repeats again and again, Africa does not need charity. Africa needs tools. Africa needs knowledge. Africa needs to stand tall. And guess what? The young people of Africa are listening. His words are spreading across social media, igniting conversations in villages, in universities, in cities across the continent. This is why the video of this meeting is going viral. Because it is not just about Burkina Faso. It is about a dream of African liberation that millions have carried for generations. As the meeting draws to a close, Ibrahim Traoré stands tall. His voice, steady but burning with conviction, delivers the final words. We want to see Burkina Faso developing. We want to see our students mastering science, building industries, and defending their motherland. This is our essential task. This is our struggle. This is our future. The hall erupts in applause. The cameras cut. The official program ends. But the story is only just beginning. Because now the real question falls on us, the viewers, the witnesses of this unfolding history. Will Africa finally break free from the invisible chains of the past? Will new alliances built on respect and equality rise stronger than centuries of exploitation? Will young leaders like Traoré succeed in rewriting the destiny of an entire continent? And perhaps even the balance of the world itself? No one can answer that today. Only time will reveal it. But one thing is undeniable. History is no longer something in dusty books or old monuments. It is alive. It is moving. It is being written right in front of our eyes. And when the pages turn, the world will never be the same again. So, what do you think, brothers and sisters? Are we truly witnessing the dawn of a new Africa? Is this partnership with Russia the first real step toward independence, or just another twist in the endless chess game of global powers? Your voice matters. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation isn't just for presidents, diplomats, or generals. It's for all of us, ordinary citizens, witnesses of history in motion. And before you go, remember this. Mainstream media will never tell you the full story, but here you will always find the unfiltered truth, the stories hidden behind the headlines. So hit that follow button, join our growing community, and stay tuned, because history is not happening tomorrow. It's happening right now, and you deserve to see it, raw, real, and uncensored.